The murder of Dolores de la Pena, a 17-year-old high school senior from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, is one of the most gruesome and heart-wrenching crimes in the annals of American true crime. Her case remains unsolved to this day, leaving a chilling legacy of unanswered questions and haunting whispers about the violence that ended her life. Dolores was a bright, vivacious teenager with a promising future ahead of her. Born and raised in the working-class neighborhoods of Philadelphia, she attended St. Hubert Catholic High School for Girls, where she was known for her kindness and radiant personality. Dolores was the middle child in a tight-knit Italian-American family, loved deeply by her parents and siblings. She dreamed of becoming a teacher, embodying the innocence and optimism of youth. The evening of July 11, 1972 began like so many other summer nights in Philadelphia. The air was warm and thick with the familiar hum of cicadas. In the working-class neighborhood of Tacony, life moved at a steady pace, the narrow streets lined with row houses, their stoops crowded with neighbors catching up on the day's events. The atmosphere was one of community and routine, a sense of safety that would be shattered before the night was over. Dolores de la Pena, a 17-year-old high school senior, was in good spirits that evening. Known for her cheerful disposition, she had spent part of the day chatting with her mother, Josephine, about plans for the rest of the summer. Dolores had recently been talking about her ambitions to become a teacher, a dream she pursued with the diligence of a straight-A student. After dinner, Dolores told her parents she was going to visit some friends. She slipped on her favorite pair of jeans and a white blouse, a simple outfit that matched her understated beauty. With a quick goodbye, she stepped out into the humid night, her long dark hair swaying as she walked down the front steps of her family's home. Dolores's plan was to meet up with a small group of friends from the neighborhood, a familiar ritual during the long summer evenings. She was last seen around 9:30 p.m., walking near Princeton Avenue and Edmond Street, just a few blocks from her home. Witnesses later recalled seeing her chatting briefly with someone in a car, though the details of this encounter remain unclear. Speculation abounds about what happened next. Dolores, who was cautious by nature, would not have willingly gotten into a stranger's car. Friends later testified that she was wary of unfamiliar people and places, making it unlikely she had wandered far from her planned route. Yet something or someone interrupted her journey that night. Some investigators believe Dolores was forcibly abducted, possibly by individuals who had been following her or watching the neighborhood for an opportunity. Others theorize she may have been lured into a car by someone she knew or trusted. The car sighting remains one of the most tantalizing clues in the case, though its significance has never been fully established. When Dolores failed to return home by midnight, her parents became concerned. It was unlike her to stay out late without letting them know. Josephine and Frank de la Pena began calling friends and neighbors, hoping someone had seen her. Their worry quickly turned to panic as each call yielded the same response. No one knew where Dolores was. By the early hours of July 12th, the family reported her missing to the Philadelphia Police Department. Initial responses from law enforcement were disappointingly dismissive. Officers suggested that Dolores, like many teenagers, might have run away or chosen to stay out with friends. Despite the family's insistence that this was out of character for Dolores, police hesitated to treat her case as an emergency. Determined to find their daughter, the de la Pena family organized their own search efforts. Neighbors joined in, walking the streets with flashlights, knocking on doors, and calling out Dolores's name. Flyers bearing her photograph were distributed throughout Tacony and surrounding areas. In the grainy black and white photo, Dolores's bright smile and shining eyes seemed to call out for help. Her disappearance soon attracted media attention, and local newspapers picked up the story. Headlines such as "Teenage Girl Missing from Tacony" brought the community's concern to a wider audience. Despite the public outcry, progress was agonizingly slow. Police conducted interviews and followed up on tips, but the trail seemed to grow colder with each passing hour. As the hours turned into days, speculation ran rampant. Some neighbors whispered that Dolores might have fallen victim to someone within the community, perhaps a person she had known and trusted. Others suggested she had encountered strangers involved in criminal activities, as the area was no stranger to the undercurrents of drug use and petty crime. One troubling aspect of the case was the lack of witnesses. Though the streets of Tacony were typically bustling, no one reported hearing a struggle or seeing anything unusual. The absence of clear evidence made it difficult for investigators to establish a timeline or identify suspects. Josephine de la Pena was a mother in agony. She refused to believe that Dolores had left willingly or that she was still alive. "She would never do this to us," Josephine reportedly told investigators. "Something has happened to her, something terrible." Her intuition proved heartbreakingly accurate. On July 16th, 5 days after Dolores disappeared, the unimaginable horror of what had happened began to come to light. But on the night of her disappearance, as her parents waited anxiously by the phone and neighbors scoured the streets, hope still lingered. They clung to the belief that Dolores would be found alive, her sweet smile lighting up their home once more. As the night of July 11th turned into the early hours of July 12th, the silence in Tacony became deafening. Somewhere, Dolores de la Pena was alone, vulnerable, and at the mercy of an unknown menace. The streets that had always felt safe now seemed menacing, and the air, once alive with the chatter of neighbors, was now thick with dread. On the sweltering morning of July 16, 1972, 5 days after Dolores de la Pena's disappearance, the horrifying truth began to unfold. In a crime so grotesque it defied comprehension, her remains were discovered in multiple locations across New Jersey. The brutality of her murder stunned law enforcement, media, and the local community, cementing her case as one of the most gruesome and haunting mysteries of its time. The first discovery was made by a sanitation worker along the side of a rural road in Jackson Township, New Jersey, about 50 miles from Dolores's neighborhood in Tacony. The worker initially believed the garbage bags contained animal remains, but as he opened one of the bags, he was met with a scene straight out of a nightmare. Dismembered human body parts. He immediately called the police. As officers arrived and began combing through the area, additional garbage bags were found nearby. Their contents confirmed the unthinkable. Dolores's remains had been disposed of like trash, her body cruelly butchered. The dismemberment was done with alarming precision, suggesting a perpetrator with knowledge of anatomy or the use of surgical tools. The cold efficiency with which her body was mutilated hinted at a chilling level of premeditation and detachment. Forensic examinations, while limited by the technology of the 1970s, revealed that Dolores had suffered greatly before her death. Signs of severe physical trauma and torture were evident, indicating her captors had inflicted unimaginable pain. Investigators surmised that her body had been dismembered to make it easier to transport and dispose of, a methodical act that further demonstrated the killer's depravity. What remained of Dolores's body was identified through dental records. Her family, already gripped by the fear of the unknown, now faced the devastating confirmation of their worst nightmares. The discovery shattered the small sense of hope they had held onto, replacing it with the unbearable weight of loss. The locations where Dolores's remains were found raised significant questions. Why New Jersey? Why such a rural and isolated area? The site where the garbage bags were dumped was far from any major urban center, suggesting the killer had deliberately chosen a remote location to avoid detection. Investigators theorized that the distance between Tacony and the disposal site indicated an effort to obscure the connection between Dolores's abduction and the crime scene. However, the gruesome nature of the crime made it impossible to ignore. News of the discovery spread rapidly, capturing headlines and dominating the evening broadcasts. For the people of Philadelphia and surrounding areas, the details of Dolores's murder were almost too horrifying to comprehend. Parents held their children closer, neighbors began locking their doors, and the community's sense of safety was irreparably shaken. The manner in which Dolores's body was disposed of led investigators to several theories about the perpetrator. The precision of the dismemberment suggested either a medical professional or someone with extensive knowledge of anatomy. Some speculated that the killer might have been a butcher or worked in a similar trade. Others believed the crime bore the hallmarks of organized crime, an act meant to send a message or settle a vendetta. One prevailing theory was that Dolores had fallen victim to individuals involved in drug trafficking. In the 1970s, Philadelphia was experiencing an increase in violent crime linked to the narcotics trade. Rumors circulated that Dolores had inadvertently crossed paths with a local drug gang, possibly witnessing something she shouldn't have. The brutality of her murder and the meticulous disposal of her remains seemed consistent with the kind of fear tactics employed by such organizations. Despite these theories, no solid leads emerged. The crime scene yielded little physical evidence that could point investigators to a suspect. The garbage bags, though a key element of the crime, bore no identifiable fingerprints. The remote location where the remains were dumped offered few clues, and the killer or killers had seemingly vanished without a trace. As details of the discovery became public, the media descended on the story with fervor. Headlines such as "Teen's dismembered body found in trash bags" and "Who killed Dolores de la Pena" gripped the nation. The lurid nature of the crime sparked widespread outrage and fear, and speculation ran rampant in the press. Reporters delved into Dolores's life, painting a picture of an innocent girl whose promising future was cruelly stolen. While the media attention brought increased scrutiny to the case, it also created challenges for investigators. Sensationalized reporting often muddied the waters, with unfounded rumors and inaccuracies making their way into the public discourse. This led to the circulation of unverified theories and put additional pressure on law enforcement to deliver answers. For the De La Pena family, the discovery of Dolores's remains was a moment of unspeakable grief. Her mother, Josephine, collapsed upon hearing the news, overcome with the magnitude of the loss. Her father, Frank, was stoic but visibly broken, his quiet strength masking the anguish of a man who had lost his daughter in the most horrific way imaginable. The family's devastation was compounded by the knowledge that Dolores's killer remained at large. The thought of her suffering, her body desecrated, and her remains discarded like garbage was a torment they carried with them for the rest of their lives. Dolores's murder cast a long shadow over Tacony and the surrounding areas. The brutality of the crime was a wake-up call for a community that had once felt insulated from such horrors. People who had always left their doors unlocked now double-checked their locks at night. Parents became hyper-vigilant, warning their children to avoid strangers and stick to well-lit streets. Investigators pursued several leads, but the case was fraught with challenges. The scattered nature of Dolores's remains made it difficult to pinpoint a specific crime scene, and the forensic techniques of the 1970s were limited compared to modern standards. One prevailing theory was that Dolores's murder was linked to local drug activity. Witnesses and informants suggested she might have been abducted and killed as part of a violent retribution. Tacony, like many urban areas of the time, had its share of criminal elements, including drug dealers and organized crime figures. Rumors circulated that Dolores may have inadvertently crossed paths with individuals involved in the drug trade. Some accounts suggested she had been abducted and tortured by a local gang, possibly to extract information about a drug transaction, or to send a brutal message to others. However, these theories lacked concrete evidence, and no arrests were ever made. The murder of Dolores de la Pena sent shockwaves through Philadelphia and beyond. Her case became a symbol of the vulnerability of young women and the horrors of unchecked violence. Parents grew more protective of their children, and the streets of Tacony seemed darker and more menacing. Dolores's family was devastated. Her parents, Josephine and Frank de la Pena, were left to grapple with the unimaginable loss of their daughter. The community rallied around them, but the knowledge that Dolores's killer remained free was a source of anguish and frustration.